Councils right around the country are jacking up rates, and nowhere more so than right here in Sydney. Northern Beaches Council recently raised rates by a whopping 40%, and if you thought that was bad, then North Sydney, well, they raised their rates by, can you believe it, 87%. Now, as if that's not bad enough, while councils are crying poor as justification for these outrageous increases in rates, they're wasting huge amounts of money on overseas junkets for councillors and staff. Let me give you just 4 examples. I could give you dozens, but here's 4. The City of Sydney Council, they sent a couple of staff to Canada for a carbon neutral summit. Tell me how that's going to benefit the ratepayers in the City of Sydney. They also sent council members to a cycling conference in Belgium. Well, I guess the City of Sydney does have a lot of bike lanes these days. Maybe that's what that was for. Not to be outdone, the Canterbury Bankstown Council, well, they sent a delegation to a leadership dialogue event in London. Now, as part of these junkets, they have to produce a report to council evaluating what benefit they derived for ratepayers. And get this, their report said, quote unquote, the leadership dialogue event provided valuable insights. It's pretty vague, but this one is my favourite. The Parramatta Council, they sent staff to the Netherlands for a library conference because there's a lot that we can learn from those in Holland about how to improve libraries for the people of Parramatta. Now, altogether, it was about $7 million spent over the last financial year by Sydney councils on overseas trips, which might not sound like a lot, but how do they justify that in a cost of living crisis? And you notice it's for things like, carbon neutrality, libraries, cycling. They never go overseas for a graffiti removal conference or for a pothole maintenance conference or for a mowing grass at the local park conference. At least those sorts of things would benefit ratepayers. Northern Beaches, as I said, put up their rates by 40%, which means about $600 extra a year for ratepayers. So here's the really upsetting thing. When ratepayers build an extra $600 a year, they start looking, where do we cut back expenses in order to afford our rates? But local councils, they're not cutting back at all. They just keep spending and spending. In fact, Caleb and Liz, 11 of the Greater Sydney councils, that's fully a third, ran deficits last year. If they're going to jack up rates for ratepayers, you'd think they would at least cut back on some things like, going to Belgium for a cycling conference?
No, that's the most important bit. Surely you know that, James. I've actually had an idea, though, as you've been talking. You mentioned the, mowing the lawn at the local park summit and the Fix the Potholes summit. If no one else is doing it, I'm going to host it right here in Sydney, and I'm going to get people from all over the world to come to Sydney for these conferences, and I'm going to make a mint while I do it, because why the hell not? If they'll go for a bloody library conference, I'm sure someone will come for a pothole conference if it means they can go for a junket on the other side of the world. One of the other ones I really liked as well was Blacktown Council, which is just up the road from you, where you are, James.
It's a fair way up the road from where I am.
Well, come on, it's a lot closer than I am, I've got to say, down in the genteel parts of Sydney in the inner west. But they spent 20 grand, or just over 20 grand, sending 3 staff to a sister city in Ireland. And they also spent 30 grand going to the UK, China, South Korea for summits and delegations. Now, to this, the council said delegations from these cities visited Blacktown in return, providing economic benefit and raising the profile of our region among their communities. Well, I'm really glad to know that, perhaps the 3 people who came from Ireland to visit Blacktown obviously boosted the economy so much while they were over here, and all the people in Ireland, from what I've heard, they're all just raving about Blacktown. These people have gone back and said, you won't believe this place we went to.
Tourist hotspot.
Blacktown. They're all walking around Ireland talking about it. The UK, where else did they go? South Korea, China.
Brazil, we've left out Brazil. There was a cultural forum in Brazil.
The only thing they want to talk about is Blacktown. I reckon that was money well spent.
If it puts Blacktown on the map, it must have been absolutely extraordinary. Take it from someone who used to be a city councillor myself. There is literally zero justification for any of these junkets. And I'll tell you why, because this level of government works like every other level of government, and that is the MPs, in this case the councillors that you have elected, they don't know much, OK? They are your representatives. But the people who draw up plans, the town planners per se, they're all back in the wings, much like we constantly complain it's the bureaucrats that run the country because, for example, the Treasurer in Victoria has asked her Treasury members, please stop using economic jargon. I can't understand what you're saying. These people aren't the experts. They are elected representatives, but the people who actually know what they're doing, we hope, are behind the scenes in the bureaucracy, working for the Department of this, the Department of that, the Department of everything else. So particularly with regards to things like, cycling tracks in Belgium, massive conference, you would never send the councillors anyway because they don't know a flying fig about cycling tracks. How many of them should there be? How can we do this in an economic way, but also saving on space, etc., and so on? You would send the people, the town planners in charge of how many cycling tracks you have in your little patch. You would send them over there if you were actually serious. And then, of course, we all know you can attend anything via Zoom these days, especially since we're all so mad about being carbon neutral. There is zero justification for this. And as a moral quandary during a cost of living crisis, this is something that wouldn't even trouble a child. Do I spend tens of thousands of dollars of the ratepayers' cash on me having a great time in Brazil or London, Belgium, Canada, the Netherlands, or do I stay home and just tune in online? Gee, I wonder.
What I want to know about all of this is, we have a local government minister here in New South Wales, as we do in every state. What does a local government minister actually do? Because Ron Hoeing is the minister here in New South Wales. He was asked would he hold a independent productivity review into how these councils are spending their money. I mean, North Sydney Council that jacked up their rates by an inordinate amount, they spent $3.1 million on gender-neutral facilities at the North Sydney Oval recently. But the local government minister, he said, look, ratepayers expect their money to be spent wisely. That was the extent of his action. He made a comment, but he declined to implement a review of how this is happening. I'm just wondering, what does a local government minister actually do?